Welcome to the stretch class where we're going to focus on some muscles in our hip area. So when you talk about the hip, there is a huge, vast number of muscles involved. There are muscles that come down from the trunk of the body into the hip, from the leg up into the hip, muscles that crisscross different directions. And so we have a lot of possible things to talk about. What I want to focus on for this particular class are the muscles in the hip area in the back. So most people are aware of the muscle that we call the glute or gluteus maximus. It makes the shape of your buttock basically. But there are a lot of other muscles underneath the glute, one of which is called the piriformis. Now, piriformis runs from the muscle here in the leg across to the muscle in the sacrum, and it is a deep muscle of the hip. And what happens often is, if you've ever heard of somebody that has sciatic pain or sciatica, it's when the nerve, the sciatic nerve, is being pinched. Now, that nerve comes out of the spinal column, out of the lumbar spine. It comes down through the center of the buttock and all the way down the back of the leg. So potentially, if there's somebody that's suffering from sciatic nerve impingement, it's coming from the spine. It could be a disc that's, there's different names for it, but basically a disc is the little piece of intervertebral tissue between the vertebrae of the spine. And if you had an accident where the spine was compressed, or if you bent over the wrong way and lifted something really heavy, that tissue can push out. It can bulge out. It has a number of different terms. And in the process, it can be pushing on this sciatic nerve. So in about 60% of the population, though, the sciatic nerve runs through the piriformis muscle. So this is something that if you haven't had the problem, someone you know has the problem. So one thing I want to say is that if you are in a acute phase where this is something new or something that has just occurred, maybe not stretching is good for a period of a few days until it subsides a little bit. But if you suffer from this chronically, these can be some stretches that will help, that will keep this muscle stretched or keep that sciatic nerve from being pinched as much. So we're going to be going into some of these stretches. So one thing you want to do is think of how to lengthen the tissue back here. So one way to kind of warm things up is it's a yoga pose called child's pose. Not everybody is able to go into the full pose. If you can't be on your knees, I'll show you a different way of doing it. But if you can be on your knees, open them a little bit wide and then stretch and come down. Now, whether you're just hanging out here or you are bringing your forehead to the floor, it doesn't matter. But you'll feel that this is starting to stretch the tissue back here in the hip area. So you could just stay here and take several deep breaths. I always recommend deep breathing. It does go a long way in helping out. Now, if you don't want to do any deep breathing, I generally tell people just to focus on what your natural breathing is. Just focus on the inhale and the exhale. But if you can do some diaphragmatic deep breath, go for it. And you do want to stay here, a minute or 2 minutes, something in that time range. I don't think that anything less than 90 seconds is worth it. So when you're talking about stretching, you kind of want to be here for a little bit. You want to be in the stretch. You want to breathe into the stretch. These are going to be really helpful. So now if this is working for you, stay here, but I am going to show you another way to do this stretch for those of you who can't be on the knees. And so for those folks, you're going to come down on your back and you're going to pull the knees into your chest. Okay? Now, if you have a bigger belly, and this is hard, again, just separate the knees and pull them in as much as you can. All right. So this is going to be a really nice stretch. Again, you're going to feel that tissue in the buttock and the deep hip muscle starting to stretch. And sometimes it feels good to mix it up. Maybe you want to be on your knees when you stretch some days and on your back when you stretch some days. And so I'm going to show you, for a lot of these stretches, there's 2 ways to do it. So you don't get bored. So you can do it one way one day, one way another day. For those of you that do suffer from that sciatic nerve impingement, which we call sciatica, you know, doing these stretches every day is kind of important to stave off a lot of the issues that you could potentially be having. So definitely want to do that a little bit more often. You know, and depending on how you feel, you can even stretch your legs up, because there are, you know, the glute max does come down the leg, and so this would be giving it a little bit more of a stretch. You're also stretching some different muscles, so, you know, you're getting even deeper into some leg muscles, which we'll be talking about in another module or so, so just stay with it. So if you chose to be on your knees, I'm going to ask you to join us on the back, and I'm going to show you a couple of stretches here. So bring your feet to the floor about hip width apart. And one thing I like to do, just to kind of feel where I'm at on each side, if you open the feet to a little bit wider than hip width, or if you're using a mat to the width of the mat, keep your feet on the floor. And then drop the knees to one side, right? And you're going to feel a pull probably in the front of the thigh, but also in the back of the hip a little bit. And I want you to just kind of do that a couple of times. Again, we're just kind of warming up that area. If we're not doing a full yoga class and we're just isolating certain muscles, it's often nice to do some warm-ups before you dig deep into it. Okay, so then the next thing to do is called figure 4. So we're going to start with the right foot. Now bring your feet back in about hip width apart and put your right foot over on your left thigh. Right? When you do that, you're going to try to push your right thigh away from your body. Just, you can use your hand or not your hand. You don't need your hand. And put your hands on your hip bones and make sure they're not tilting or moving. You don't want the pelvis moving. So what I do is actually kind of pull the belly button and the muscles down here by the belly button down towards the floor and keep the pelvis in a neutral place. Now, here it may or may not feel like a big stretch for some of you. Some of you might be like, wow, you feel it already. So again, that could be some of you with this sciatic nerve impingement in that piriformis muscle. Now, those of you that don't feel much of a stretch are going to want to go deeper. So now I'm going to have you flex the right foot. Flexing means, so this is pointing and this is flexing. And when you flex, you pull not just the big toe back, but even the pinky toes back. So if you have your leg crossed over, you're going to flex the foot, keep that right thigh forward and the pelvis neutral. Then you're going to try to pick up the left leg and pull it in. Now, I'm not using my hands, and I can already feel this as a deeper stretch down here in this muscle, in this deep glute muscle and piriformis muscle. So what you can do is just stay here, and if you want, you can take your hands and kind of take your right arm through and under and left arm around and under, and hook your hands under your leg. And then you're just going to breathe. Now, notice if your feet or legs pulled to one side, and you want to kind of keep everything nice and even so that the left thigh is in line with the left breast. And you're hugging in. Now again, some of you that want to go deeper, instead of holding underneath this left knee, you can reach above the left knee and hug in. My arms are a little short, so I'm going to stay with under for today. And some people like to stretch the other leg to the sky. That's entirely optional. Again, that does get into some other muscles. But if you're not feeling it as much in the right hip, then go ahead and keep that foot down, because the focus here is in the deep muscles in the right hip and buttock area. So we're going to continue to breathe as you pull that in. And even after 90 minutes, 90 minutes, yeah, we're going to be here 90 minutes. Even after about 90 seconds, you're still going to feel like you can go deeper. So, if you feel a little give or release, just tug that leg in a little bit closer and find a new level of stretch. Now, another reason why I ask you to do deep breathing is because that helps you monitor your stretch. If you're going too deep, then you're not going to be able to breathe deep, right? If you're forcing something where you could potentially be hurting something, you might find that you're not able to take deep breaths. So the breaths actually monitor your level of intensity and being in the right place with your stretch. So continue the breath or the stretch. And whenever you feel like releasing, as long as you've been there at least 90 seconds, you're going to bring the leg back down and bring the right foot to the floor. Now, I always do just like another little twisty thing just to let that go. And you might notice greater ease or nothing. Who knows? Then we're going to do our other side. So feet flat on the floor as you pick up that left foot, cross it over. You're going to press the left thigh away and flex the foot. Now, I notice when I do this side, I have a tendency to want to move my pelvis. So again, I'm going to have to pull that belly down and keep my pelvis neutral. And you might notice in yourself, and it could have been on the other leg or this leg, that the knee doesn't go as far forward. So that's going to indicate that there's something a little tighter on a particular side for you. It's very, 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 very common to have one hip tighter than the other, right? So don't worry about it. Just be aware of it. It's really important. So what are you doing, baby? So now, again, for those of you who need a bigger stretch, you're going to hug that right knee in, maybe lift it up, maybe hold it here. Maybe reach with your hands, keeping that right leg in line with the right breast, and just breathing. Now, again, you're going to want to find your point of stretch. Stay there and breathe. And notice if you get any give, you can tug in tighter, but the breath is going to keep you in that better place, in the best place, really. So this particular stretch in yoga is called supine pigeon. And in a minute, I'm going to show you one-legged pigeon. And I'll even show you the variation of this where we have the seated pigeon. So the whole pigeon family is really, really good for this, this deep hip muscle, the buttock, the glute maximus. It's also a good stretch for parts of the other glutes, and then also particularly a piriformis stretch. And again, you can take that right leg up if you want. Now, if you do that and your buttock or your hip, you feel it lift off the floor, then just bring it back down. Again, never compromise the initial phase of the pose. If you add something on and it doesn't increase the stretch, if it feels less of a stretch because you came out of something, then you need to just go back to where you were. And we'll be here for just kind of another few moments, loosening that up. Really good stretch. I can't say enough about this stretch for people who suffer from sciatic pain. Go ahead and release that side and just go ahead and take a full body stretch. That's always a nice release. You can just stretch out in any way you want because we're going to be coming up to seated. And to come to seated, try not to lift up this way because that puts a little too much pressure on your back. Because we're doing a little bit of therapeutic stretch, I'd rather you roll to the right and bring your left hand to the floor and push your body up. Okay? So now just to show you, this is the exact same stretch seated, is you would start with one leg straight, bring the other leg over, flex the foot, push the thigh away, hands behind the back. Now in this pose, since you don't have the floor to support your back, you do need to keep it up, and if you feel like it's caving and rounding, you'd come out of the pose. So the equivalent to picking up the opposite knee would be putting the foot on the floor and pulling in. Now for me, I do feel this is a more intense stretch than on my back. And so if I'm doing this personally, I'll tend to do this a little bit more. All right, so that's just an option. I don't want to stay there too long. You can just try the other side to give it a little shot and feel it for yourself and say, okay, some people can't be up this way. They have a hard time with their shoulders caving in or keeping their arms straight. So you might have to do it on your back. Okay, but that's the opposing. And look, see this? If I were to come down on my back and pull in, same pose, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Oh, and remember, roll over and come up easy. All right, so that is the supine and seated pigeon. So now one-legged pigeon is an even more intense stretch. And I'm going to ask you to maybe have a pillow or a block because, first of all, maybe some of you can't do this on the knees, but some of you might find this incredibly difficult. And I'm going to show you on each side what it looks like. So we're going to come up on our hands and knees. And in this pose, you're going to bring, in this side I'm going to do the right leg in first. So the right knee is going to slide up, and I'm just going to have it right in line with my right wrist, okay? Now, never bring it in, but always you can bring it out, okay? So it can be in line with the wrist or further out. And then you're going to slide your foot over to the left, okay? So when you do that, this leg's going to be on an angle, not a 90-degree angle for most of you. For most of you, maybe like a 45-degree angle. And then you're going to take the other leg, the back leg, and slide it back, right? So notice I tucked my toes under and just slid back. Now, if your hip bones are facing forward, you're going to feel this kind of squish and this big stretch here in the hip. So depending on how close to the floor it is, like mine's pretty close, I'm about that far away, maybe about an inch away. And as I breathe and stretch, it's going to release and it'll probably be touching the floor. So I'm not going to use a block. But let's say you're up here and there's a lot of space between your butt and the floor. Put something in there. Grab a block or cushion and wedge it under. So you don't want to wedge it so that you're forcing over, but you do want to be in a comfortable position, okay? Now, once you're there, I want you to walk back and look over your shoulder and just make sure your back leg is straight, all right? And once it's straight, you can decide, do you want to stay up? Staying up is fine. For some of you, this is a big stretch. Some of you will be like, oh, I can't even hold myself up anymore. And so you can come down on the forearms. You can lie down. And as long as your hips are even, it's all good, right? So this is the one-legged pigeon. And, you'll see these pictures of people in all kinds of variations of pigeon. All kinds of like really uber flexible-y, fun little pretzel-y, crazy things. I would say, if you're comfortable, if you're breathing deep, explore. Feel free to explore. Otherwise, just maybe stay where you can comfortably breathe deeply. One easy thing to add is a simple rock, right? Rock your hip back and forth, or side to side, I should say. If this is uncomfortable, then, again, you just stay and you breathe. This is called one-legged pigeon. And again, these are some of just the best poses I know for the, so this is a good time to talk about that glute maximus. So again, this muscle is, I believe, the biggest or largest muscle in our body. It actually starts up around the hip bone. It comes down around the sacrum. It's the whole contour of your butt. It comes across and it funnels, this big muscle funnels into one spot at the top of the leg, which creates this long tendinal membrane that goes down the side of your leg. And we reference it as the IT band. So you might feel this all the way down here because we're stretching the muscle belly, but we're also stretching into the tendon a little bit too, which is pulling down the leg. And that piriformis, the deeper muscles. And there's other muscles, but these are the two I'm kind of talking about today. So when you're ready to come out of that stretch, if you can't bring this back leg forward, then you can lean over, swing around, come back onto the knee. But whatever you want to do to get back up, and again, kind of like what I did on the back, is just kind of swing those hips from side to side and give it a little release. And sometimes even just stretch the leg that you just had forward the other way so that you can get that blood flow all the way down into the calf, especially if you held that stretch for a while. Okay, so now the other side. So let me turn around. So again, you can see, and I don't think I need the block. Never know, this is my tighter side. So again, the left leg is going to come forward and you're going to slide it behind the left wrist, or it can go further away. Take the foot across to the right and then slide the right leg back. Right? Now, there's nothing wrong with, did you see that little adjustment I made? There's nothing wrong with lifting the knee and making any kind of adjustment so that you can lower into it a little bit more. But just be honest about what you're doing. That left leg is on that diagonal. And if you need any cushioning or something under the hip, grab it. And then look forward, bring your hands under your shoulders. Check the back leg, make sure it's straight. And you can decide, am I staying up here or am I coming down here? How is that feel for me today? And then you're just going to take those deep breaths in and out through your nose. And just feel this gorgeous stretch. Such a gorgeous stretch. After, that 90 seconds, if you're still breathing in, you're going to feel releasing, like you're going to feel how your legs are getting closer to the floor. And, if you feel more things touching the floor, one is that the stretch is going deeper. And that also at that deeper level, you can encounter more resistance and more tension. So, sometimes when you're holding a stretch for a long period of time, what happens is it gets easier and then harder and then easier and then harder and then easier. But then when you come out of the pose, you should feel like that whole part of the body completely change, like really, really, really change. And I have to say, for my folks who have a lot of pain in this area, that sciatica, usually they're only doing the stretch on the back, and they might They might be staying there, really. And part of that is it's really actually painful to even move when you have that. So honor that. And I feel horrible for those people that are that percentage of the population that sciatic nerve travels through the piriformis. There's just nothing you can do about that. So if that piriformis muscle is getting tight and tight and tight by repetitive strain or various other variables, really it's just going to pinch that nerve, and you're just going to have to find ways to work around that, either change the repetitive movement or do these stretches proactively all the time. All right, so I'm going to come up. Here's that move where you bring the leg around. We're all going to come into a seated pose. And just for a moment, I want you to come into cobbler. So this should feel pretty good because it's actually not stretching the glute or the piriformis very much. It's keeping it in quite a neutral position, I would say. But I'm going to show you a double pigeon pose, which is an even deeper stretch. Some of you will not be able to do this. Some of you will, but I'm going to kind of show you the modifications of getting there. So this is the first one. This is like everything's neutral, and it should feel really good. Now, if I want to start the stretch, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking the legs, and one leg is going to slide under the other, and they're going to keep sliding and stack like this. And I'm going to have the ankles and the knees lined up. So you can pick which leg you want to try first. So if I want to bring my right leg on top first, I'm going to put my right ankle on top of my left ankle and just shift the left foot over. So I'm keeping them at center. Now, again, this might not feel like too much. Some of you are like already feeling something, or it's hard to even stack. Let's make sure we have a block. A pillow will work fine too, but the blocks are really good. So now we're going to slide it in a little bit more and see how that does. Okay, keeping those legs stacked. Again, for me, this feels perfectly fine. But I am starting to feel a little bit of a pull in that deep muscle. So what I want you to do is pull the muscle tissue out on each side and just make sure you feel the bones sitting down and not, so that the tissue of the muscle isn't pulled underneath there, so you can really get that full stretch. Then the full pose is having the ankle in line with the knee and both feet flexed. Remember, you do not want to roll the ankle. You do want to pull the pinky toes back. Notice the space here. What did I say about that? If there's space, put something there, right? So don't suffer. If there's space, put something there. If there's a little bit of space, like, a half an inch to an inch, you know that it's going to release. You probably don't need it. Another cue, I think, is that the feet should be slightly off the leg. So if your foot's kind of in on the thigh, you got to move over a little bit more. Now, this again might not be enough. Some of you might be like, well, give me the whole thing, Tracey. So this is where you would crease from the hip, send your tailbone back. Now I'm really feeling that in the tight hip. And I can even stretch out and I can bring the head down. And this is, at some point, you are going to discover tension. And it could be minimal or it could be a doozy. So wherever it is, you're going to breathe. And by the way, if you have to come out of it, just come out of it, shake it out. I'm going to show you the last stretch because we're butting up against time here. So I can keep sliding my legs over even more, and I'm going to have them now where the knees are lined up and the feet are across. This is the biggest stretch here. I don't want to be leaning on one side. So if you're not able to do this, just keep backing it up to where you were most comfortable. For those of you that are comfortable here, both sitting bones are on the floor. Again, the option is to fold forward. that could feel really crazy. Or you can just stay upright, right? And because we've been here long enough and we're butting up against the time, we're going to release and do the other side. So I'm going to put the other ankle on top, and oh, I had a pop right there. I don't know if you heard it. So right there in the groin, I got a little pop, which means something released and let a little tension go. So you're going to keep moving it in to where you're comfortable. Again, as I said before, this side is not as tight on me. So even though I had that little pop there, this side probably needs to pop and it just hasn't done it yet. So you're going to find where you need to be. You're going to breathe. Right. And I would say, as always, check with your doctor if you have ongoing issues. If you're not able to do some of these poses, always start with the easiest versions. What I did in the beginning, don't just jump into this. You didn't warm up enough. You didn't stretch the tissue enough. Work your way into the bigger stretches. And sometimes the bigger stretches don't come for months or years even, especially if you have this issue with this ongoing kind of sciatica pain. Really is and can be very debilitating. So I remember in my early 30s or so, I encountered this pain, and I think that it stayed with me for almost a year before I worked it out. And it was horrible. Even just lifting the leg, taking a step, really, really difficult. So I'm hoping that these stretches really help you out, help you to release any tension there. Of course, as always, reach out to me if you have any individual needs or concerns, private yoga or different instruction. Otherwise, enjoy these hip stretches that focus on stretching the glutes, the piriformis, and those muscles and parts of the body that might be tightening around that sciatic nerve. So may you be in less pain. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.